Welcome to Theological Grazing.
Aristotle is helping me shed more of the modern egalitarianism and kind of democratic mindset that I have as a modern American man. I'm struck more and more with just the nature of how God has made the world with hierarchy, and sometimes we don't like that. A lot of times right now we don't like that, but this is the nature of the world, and it's good. So this is something that I thought about while reading Aristotle's Politics, and particularly there's a point when he's speaking about those who are ruled versus those who are rulers, and he talks about there being different virtues that are necessary from both. That both groups, those who rule and those who are ruled, have maybe some overlapping virtues, but also there are some virtues that in essence belong to one or the other. And I don't know if that's quite the right way to put it. I think that the biblical conception is probably much more, when you think about the book of Proverbs or something like that. It's much more, here is the way to live if you want to become a ruler, a king, somebody who takes dominion, kings and queens in God's economy. There's a particular way to live. There are ways that you are supposed to be that put you in that kind of a position. So I'm not sure that the way that Aristotle kind of works it out is exactly right. However, the basic idea that those who rule have different virtues or are expected to be virtuous in different ways than those who are ruled is just obviously true. Right? There is more responsibility for somebody who owns a business than somebody who works for that business. It doesn't mean that the person working for the business is less important. No, you need somebody like that. It also doesn't mean that their virtue doesn't matter. A store would, think about like a small convenience store maybe. It would come to a complete standstill if you had somebody that was constantly, causing problems that would, destroy some of the equipment, or they were stealing something. This is something that any one person acting in a non-virtuous way could bring even very large companies to a standstill. But by and large, the amount of choices that they have that could lead to that problem is far less than somebody who is a manager of said convenience store. The decisions they make are going to affect them, and it's not that it just affects them. It will have a greater effect on the store as a whole, which has a greater effect on the individuals that work for that store. And so the responsibility given to that person is significantly more. And as somebody who has more responsibility, we do typically expect far more virtue from somebody in that position. We expect those in positions of authority to have greater virtue. Now, obviously, this has been tainted with the fact that, basically we think of all politicians as those who are kind of sleazy and untrustworthy. But ideally, those who govern are to be those who have more recognizable virtue in some way, or they should at least be held to a higher standard of virtue. Not to say that there may be more virtuous in themselves or not, We see this in the church. The scripture speaks of this for the church, right? Those who are going to rule in the church, those who would seek to be an elder, well, they have to be above reproach. And there are certain things that have to be true of them that ideally, I think, would be true of all, but are not true of all, right? You can be a member of a church while not being held to the same standard as somebody who's going to be a pastor of that church. And we get this. We think this is important, this is good, this is right. And I think it's good to remember that this is the nature of the world that God has made, that those whom he entrusts with authority are to be those who also are those with notable virtue. And as somebody lives a virtuous life, I think it is generally true as well that God entrusts them more and more with responsibility. I think this causes a problem, though, for our modern egalitarian age. Within our system of politics, of governance, of authority, we're supposed to treat everybody's voice as if it's valuable, right? Everybody's opinion is just as valuable as anyone else's. This is simply not true. It's just not true. It's not actually the way that the world works. And I think that moving more toward an Aristotelian kind of system, which maybe I'm wrong about, by the way. I don't know that for sure this is exactly how to understand Aristotle, but I think this is what he was saying. And if that is the case, that seems to me to be a much more true conception of the world. And if somebody lives an honorable and virtuous life, and they take on more and more responsibility for others, and they prove themselves with that responsibility that they take for others, they should have more authority, they should have more power, they should have more voice, they should have more of a say. The idea of democracy is not a good idea. It's not good that every person, right, the person that completely wrecks their life because of the choices that they make, right? They are living a life that damages those around them and damages themselves. They should not have the same authority. They should not have the same power within the system of governance that we live in. And if they do, and when they do, this is not actually something to celebrate. This is incredibly damaging. This is incredibly dangerous even, because it's a way of entrusting those who have proven themselves untrustworthy with power, that they have shown themselves to be the kind of person that will abuse that power. So Aristotle is making me much more of hierarchicalist in my conception of the world, and I think ultimately that's good. Well, that's all, folks. If you could help me out, rate and review this podcast, share it with a friend, go ahead and email me if you have any questions. We're out.